Is not. Is it on? It's on? Okay.
You won't hear it.
Okay, that's fine. I'd like to keep this somewhat informal, which is a bit difficult in a room this size. Plus, I can't wander in front of the projector because I'll put my shadow there. But if you indulge me, I'll do that. I like to walk around a little bit. Let me ask a question before I start. How many of you in the room are business majors? If you, by show of hands, okay. How many of you are business minors? How many of you have no interest whatsoever in business, just thought I might be entertaining for a little while? Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thanks for your honesty. But I need to also ask another question before I get into the presentation. By show of hands, how many people know who Steve Jobs is? Okay, great. Okay, so that'll work. Some people did not raise their hands. So, could someone tell those who did not raise their hands who Steve Jobs is?
The best computer designer in the world.
That's good. That's one possible answer. Another answer is? CEO of Apple. CEO of Apple, right. That's exactly right. He did a really interesting thing about, I want to say about 6 months ago. He gave a really interesting speech at Stanford. It really kind of caused a stir because it was very honest. And I thought it was the best thing that I had read about how to manage your life. Now you ask, well, why are you talking about how to manage your life? We're talking about business here, because I think the business that you're engaged in actually is the business of managing your life. We're going to talk about that. And the reason why I selected that topic is when Ken sent me an email about what I should talk about, there were a variety of topics there, and I thought to myself, how can I, in 12 slides or less, incorporate all the themes that Ken mentioned? So I've attempted to do it in this presentation. No, actually, I'm going to focus on these three things. Focus on a career, work. If you don't like the term career, think about work. You'll all have to do that at some point. How you obtain or gain success in that work, and then what Steve Jobs has to say about it. So let me start by saying, as I was driving up to come to campus, I hadn't been here really in about 7 or 8 years. Last time I came was my 20th anniversary. I was a 78 grad. Actually, Jeff was mentioning he was a year ahead of me. Classes of 78 and 79 were actually pretty close. And a lot of memories sort of flooded in my mind. I met my wife here, so my kids are indirectly the product of a union at Houghton. So much of this place looks very, very similar to the way it looked in 1978. I will say that the cafeteria, this building, doesn't look all that different. When I walked in downstairs and Eric was mentioning to me that they were going to renovate the first floor, I looked in and I said, oh my gosh, this looks like it was 20 years ago. There's a certain comfort factor in that. I think there's a continuity here that you don't often see in the world, and I think that that's a great thing. But I owe a lot of what I've done in my life to this institution. You know, the 4 years or the 3 years or the 2 years you spend here will be years that you remember for the rest of your life for a very interesting reason. And the reason is that in life, we don't remember what we are told. We don't frequently remember what we read. We frequently don't remember what we see. But we always remember one thing. We remember what we feel. And so when you come back 10 or 15 years from now, you'll remember a lot of things about this place. Hopefully mostly good, maybe some bad, but you will remember a lot of things that you feel. When I walked up to, or I drove up to campus, bang, it reminded me of being here 20 years ago. Because they were the things that I felt more than 20 years ago. I stayed on campus at York House. And my house was kind of an interesting group of people. The people in my house became doctors. 2 of them are tenured university professors. We had a great time. We would come back from class and engage in in healthy intellectual debate. I still remain friends with many of them. So a little bit about the special place that is Houghton. So I want to talk about three things. One is about career steps. I've had a very strange career. I want to share that with you. How my career developed. How your career plans feed into your life plans. And then I want to talk about, as I said, these thoughts on this speech that Steve Jobs gave at Harvard. So Ken mentioned before, I left Houghton and was determined to become an attorney, and I went to law school at NYU. I was fortunate to get in, and ended up having an opportunity to go to the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington for 5 years. So I went straight from undergrad to law school, went there for 3 years, graduated at age 24, and then spent the next 5 years at the Department of Justice. Someone asked, well, why'd you make this abrupt change from working at the Department of Justice to going to business school, which is what I did? And the answer was that at age 28, I was given the opportunity to litigate a case that would take anywhere between 5 and 7 years to resolve. I by then had had a lot of trial experience. I tried a couple of cases, had done a bunch of depositions, and was given the opportunity to do this big case. There was one problem with that. At age 28, I couldn't imagine myself doing anything for 7 years, much less working on one case. And I just had this consciousness that I needed to do something else, that I needed to make a change. I think it's not atypical. During the 20s, you'll figure out what you want to do, things that you want. You may make a career change. In my case, I decided that I'd become interested through the process of doing commercial litigation in business, and decided I wanted to go back and get a business degree. So I changed course and went to the University of Rochester and picked a very hard quantitative school. I'd done a lot of law practice. I decided I wanted to really get immersed in quantitative approach to business, and I did that. So I went to the University of Rochester, and while I was there, one day out of the blue, I got a call from the Human Resources Department, and they said, we've been looking at resumes, and we think we have a match for you. Would you be interested in applying for a job as an intern? This was 1988. And I knew nothing about Bausch & Lomb, zero. I had no interest in staying in Rochester. My desire was to go back to Washington, D.C. from where I'd come. But I went. I went to Bausch & Lomb and interned there for a summer, and I've stayed 18 years later. So sometimes life takes these very unpredictable turns, and you have to be flexible in terms of doing it. What have I done in my career? I really have spent half of my career in finance and half of my career in general management. The first part of my career I spent doing treasury work. I'll explain what a treasurer does when I come to the end. Treasury work, and the chief financial officer of the company said, you know, if you want to grow in the finance organization, you really should accept a rotation through internal audit. One problem with that: you will have to accept a demotion during the time you're in internal audit, but I can guarantee you that it's a good thing. So I actually am one of the few people in the company who went from being a manager to being demoted for 2 years as part of a rotation, title-wise, and then came back into the finance organization. It was a critical step. Internal audit is a great opportunity for a period of time, as those who've done audit will tell you, because you learn a lot about a company. So I had an opportunity to travel the breadth of the company to Europe, to Asia, and to Latin America. And indirectly, that helped me to get jobs that I got in the future, because I got to know people. So one piece of advice I would give is keep yourself as broad as possible. We're going to talk about foxes and hedgehogs. You need to understand who you are. Keep yourself very broad. The issue of whether you're a fox or a hedgehog is important. I'll come to that. Then I became the head of the director of investor relations. What do? They talk with analysts on Wall Street. In a company, there are expectations that shareholders have of the company, and someone needs to talk with them about whether those expectations are being met or not. And that's what I did. I did that for 2 years. I talked with analysts, discussed what the prospects of the company would go, very much to presentations similar to this, and talk with mutual fund managers and tell the story of the company. I did that for 2 years. By then, I mentioned I was an internal